Morning, everyone. We'll get going here, 9:35. We have quorum, thanks to the two councillors who just showed up. We did have council last night until 10 p.m., so that's my disclaimer. First, we need approval of the agenda. So you've got it in your package. So I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Mac, seconded by Patricia. There is an addendum, the item of correspondence about the library. It should be on your desks. So that's approval, that's automatically added. So is there anything else? Okay, so we'll approve the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Just to remind everyone that when I call a vote, you have to put your hand up for, in favor, or against. You're not allowed to abstain. Sorry? Confirmation of minutes. I need a mover and a seconder. This is minutes from March 21st. Moved by Dawn, seconded by Catherine. Any errors or omissions? Okay, so the minutes are in the package. We'll vote to receive the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Mac. Okay. Did you need that in writing? Okay, and you've given the clerk the disclosure in writing. Anything else? Okay. Presentations, there are none. No delegations or briefings. Business A, cultural heritage. A, B, and C are empty this month. D, statutory business, is never empty. Today we have several heritage permit applications in Part 5 heritage districts. So we'll be following those rules. I'll just remind everyone right now once, and then we'll just follow the rules as they come up. So the first thing is, were your comments, if you made them, captured in the package, in the written file? And the second thing would be members of the public, and then members of the committee can make oral statements, which are captured by the clerk, and then we vote whether or not to support council's approval. It's council that does the approval, and we are just in an advisory role. Okay, so the first one is 91 Gore Street. And Ryan is going to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this property is at 91 Gore Street. It's at the north side of the street between Wellington and King Streets. The subject property includes a central unit of a three-story, three-unit limestone road dwelling. It was built in 1842, right on the corner of Wellington. It is rated as significant in the Sydenham District Plan. Its value is emphasized by its local limestone construction. It was designed by well-known local architect George Brown, who did this building as well as SNR and a number of others in the city. It was built for merchants and real estate moguls John Watkins and Samuel Muckelson, and it's part of a prominent building, a street corner on Sydenham Street, or Gore Street. The application before you is an application for alteration under Section 42. It's to gain approval to replace this rear addition on the building, which you can see in the picture to the bottom right, with a new one-story rear addition. The rear addition will be clad in a vertical board and batten style hardy board plank material in a dark gray shade, and a concrete foundation, which is to be clad in limestone that is reclaimed from this existing addition. The proposed fenestration is to be two vertical slider sash windows and a door with partial glazing. The image on the right is a conceptual image. The brick is no longer being proposed, and the door may be on the left side. So it's there to give you a bit of a proportion of what the rear addition will look like. The roof will be have a moderate slope and be a standing seam steel roof. In terms of our analysis, the current rear one-story stucco-sided addition is not noted as a heritage attribute. It's likely a later addition to the building, and its removal will have no impact on the heritage district. The proposed addition is clearly distinguishable from the limestone heritage resource that fronts Gore Street and Wellington Street, while it is complementing the heritage attributes of this site by its use of limestone and on the foundation and matching window trim color on these windows with the rest of the building. The proposed addition will be located to the rear of the property and be clearly subordinate to the prominence of the building, the limestone building on the street. We did circulate this to the usual internal departments and agencies. We received no significant concerns. Our engineering department notes that the grading will need to be confirmed at building permit to ensure it's accommodated properly. We did circulate to this committee as well. Your comments are summarized in the exhibit, and we received no significant concerns as well. And Mr. Chair, we recommend approval of this alteration as submitted.
Thank you. So as with every file, you can see, in this case, it's on page 23 of the package, the input summary from us. And if there were comments, there'd be an X in the first column. Someone that responded but gave no comments has an X in the second column, and then no response received in the third column. So see, if you made comments, you could have a chance now to correct them if they were incorrectly captured. And I see no one is going to do that. So then we go to members of the public. Okay, seeing none, we go to members of the committee for oral submissions about the project. Seeing none, we will call the vote. Need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. The recommendation moved by Catherine, seconded by Councillor Michelle. So the recommendation you'll see is in the package, in the agenda, that Heritage Kingston supports Council's approval of the following: the alterations to 91 Gore Street, in accordance with the details prescribed in the application, deemed complete on March 22nd. Said alterations to include the removal of a rear addition and the construction of a new one-story sloped roof rear addition. And there is 2 conditions. Any discussion? We will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Good luck with the work. That's that file. The next file is 268 Main Street in Berryfield.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 268 Main Street is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as part of the Village of Berryfield Heritage Conservation District. The property is located on the east side of Main Street in the village on quite a high point of land. The property contains St. Mark's Anglican Church, a Gothic Revival style church which was designed and built by Richard Jones in 1843-1844. It is the only church in the village and a landmark structure due to its location on the high point of land. It's actually listed as a heritage attribute of the district and is highly visible from multiple directions. Additionally, its limestone construction is one of the primary building materials found in the district. So in the fall, emergency repairs and repointing were carried out on the tops of the buttresses on the north and south elevations to seal some of the holes to prevent water ingress and further damage over the winter. Additionally, a hole in the upper portion of the southeast corner of the tower was filled. This heritage permit application is to gain approval to undertake a significant amount of masonry repointing on and around the main bell tower, including a number of the buttresses. However, the extent of the repointing can only be confirmed until once they start works, and it is possible they may need to also replace some stones. So I just want to show you, there's the front elevation, and it's anticipated that the most of the work will be happening on that southeast corner of the tower. Let's go back. So in terms of a cultural heritage analysis, really this is a landmark structure, being the only church in the village, and it is quite a significant attribute of Berryfield. The proposed repair and repointing work is required to conserve the church over the long term. Additionally, these proposed repairs would support the conservation goals and objectives that have been articulated in the plan. Limestone being one of the primary building materials in the district and listed as a heritage attribute of the district plan. And given the cultural heritage value of limestone in the district, combined with the significance of limestone in the wider region and city, The conservation of the church and bell tower provides considerable public benefit. All works are to be completed in accordance with the city's policy on masonry restoration and best practices in heritage conservation, including the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. So, and there we go. Here's the recommendation that Heritage Kingston supports the approval. Thank you.
Thank you. So same process. In this case, the page with people's comments is, I believe, 44. And there were no comments on this file, so we go to the public. Members of the public that wish to make comments on this file. Yes. Just sit down and turn on that microphone.
Thank you, and thank you, Alex. We're here again to ask for your permission to do more work on our tower. Comes around every 5 or 6 years, and being a limestone building, all the mortar in between disappears on us. So we would ask your approval to go ahead and look at the inside of the tower, and there may be more work needed than what they see from the outside once they get in and take off the skin of the tower. But we have significant mortar that has fallen out, and we even see a few pieces of the limestone down on the stairs. So we'll ask your approval to go ahead and have this work done. Thank you.
There any other members of the public? Okay, so now members of the committee have a chance to make comments to add to the file. Yes, remember to keep your comments are relevant to the question whether we support the application. Yes, Mac.
This is quite. I know that 5 or 6 years ago, you guys were here, and it was about doing work up on the top of the tower, I believe, and waterproofing the top of that bell tower. And there's some talk at that point of a bell or some kind of a communications stack be put up there. Did that all get done, and this is something that's beyond that?
Yeah. So normally it's staff that answers that question, maybe if they don't know. So the work from the last application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that work has been completed. The bell antenna is in there, as I understand it.
You can nod agreement if you like. Normally, we don't go back to, it's not like a multiple appearance thing. You sort of only get one chance to address the committee. So, thank you. Don.
So I had a similar sort of question. I know in previous years there were concerns inside the bell tower, and I believe it was there was some steel reinforcing added to the tower at that point. And it just occurs to me that when they get inside and have a good look, there may be need for more work than simply repointing and even replacing. So my question to staff is really, what will they come back to the committee if there is a need for further structural supporting or strengthening?
Staff, good question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The folks at St. Mark's have been very good at keeping an open communication channel with staff as far as they move along with these investigations. I think the big part of this application is they'd like the opportunity to fully understand what they need to do as far as stabilizing this tower. It's a big investment for them, and it's a big undertaking to properly understand this. So I'm hoping that this approval will be all they need to stabilize this structure, which is why it's before you today, because it's a substantial undertaking. If this requires anything beyond what they have presented us today, then certainly we will come back as necessary.
So just to note that the recommendation to council, if passed, would be us supporting the approval of alterations, including repair and or reconstruction, right, of the chimney, or sorry, of the tower, right? Does it not say that? Where am I looking here? Repairs and repointing, sorry. So what Dawn has just said is basically, what if it's work that's not included in that wording? Theoretically, either another permit would be required, or the current permit could be said to include whatever the work is needed from the examination. I don't think we actually know in advance what happens. I think staff would bring it back to us if it's necessary under the Heritage Act, basically. Mac.
I don't know this Andy, I can't remember, Hutchwith, I guess. I don't know the company WSP. I presume they've had experience with heritage buildings.
Yes, well, Andy Huckworth particularly has vast experience in heritage buildings. Yeah.
I assume they'll be on site to things once you open them up.
I would assume that they'd be doing periodic reviews during the work as well.
I'm just wondering if we shouldn't make the recommendation a little bit looser, so that if they do get in there and they find there's issues, well, they're all set up, they could actually do the structural work without having to come back to the committee, I think. Just
Before you respond, remind the committee that the recommendation that council gets is whether we support the recommendation as written by staff. So aside from minor sort of wording clarifications, it's really not, we can't amend the recommendation, but go ahead, staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would add is that much of the structural repair work would likely be on the interior of this structure, which is beyond the jurisdiction of the HCD plan. So really we cannot ask for them to come back if it's internal structural repairs.
For the new members, what he just said is basically the Heritage Act and the Heritage District governs the exterior of the buildings. And so if other work is discovered to be necessary, it may not need a heritage permit, and therefore we wouldn't see it again. But if it was alterations to the outside, they would need this approval. All right, that's clear. So we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Mac and Dawn. So that Heritage Kingston Sports Council's approval of the following: the alterations 268 Main, complete on March 22nd, said repairs and repointing to the main bell tower and a number of buttresses, subject to one condition. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. 18 Wellington Street. This is another Part 5 application. Old Sydenham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So 18 Wellington Street is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, as well as Part 5 as part of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. The property is located on the northwest corner of Wellington and Lower Union Streets, and is also within the North to Bagot sub-area as defined in the Old Sydenham Heritage Area HCD plan. The property contains a 2.5-story red brick Victorian dwelling built in 1896. And the subject property was built for James C. Strange and designed by William Newlands, obviously a well-known local architect. The designation bylaw describes this building as designed by William Newlands to take advantage of its corner site. It is an excellent example of Newlands' Victorian style with bay windows, fan-lighted double windows, paneled brickwork, and an interesting roof design. It is also rated as significant to the Old Sydenham Heritage District. So this heritage approval is to gain approval to repair and or reconstruct the large brick chimney, which is located on the south side of the roof line on the Lower Union Street side. The full extent of the deterioration is not known yet, so when they get up there and they take a look, they'll be able to better understand whether they'll be able to repair the chimney as is, or whether they may actually need to take it right down to the roof line. Now, the applicants noted that if it's necessary to take it down to the roof line, that the chimney would be reconstructed to the same form and detailing using reclaimed bricks. So in terms of cultural heritage analysis, this southern wall of the building, including the chimney, is highly visible from both Wellington and Lower Union Streets. And the proposed works to rebuild or rebuild the brick chimney will improve its longevity by stabilizing the feature and restricting water into the building. The red brick construction of this building is a heritage attribute of the property and is also an important part of the cultural heritage of the district. So section 4.3.1 of the plan includes policies on the maintenance and repair of chimneys. And the plan notes that in order to conserve the symmetry and architectural detailing of a building's roofline, it is important to retain existing chimneys rather than to remove them. The applicant is proposing to reuse the existing bricks as far as possible, and if necessary, replace the unusable bricks with ones that match as closely as possible. All works are to be completed in conformity with the city's policy on masonry restoration and heritage buildings. So I'll move along to our recommendation.
Okay, so this has similarities with the previous file in the fact that the extent of the work is not known in advance. The recommendation has the wording, the alterations, repair and or reconstruction of the southernmost chimney. Anything not captured in that would not be part of the permit. The committee did have a chance to do preliminary comments. We did receive one preliminary comment. Dawn, was it captured accurately? Yes? Okay, thanks. Members of the public now have a chance to address the committee on this file. Yes? You don't have to, but yeah. So just to note, the committee, the owner is here and witnessing the proceedings. We have, we have a recommendation that Heritage Kingston supports council's approval. We need a mover and a seconder. We need, does anyone have any comments to add to the file before we move in second? Yes, Don.
I just want to mention, my comment was mainly addressing the question of whether this will be a functional committee, functional chimney, sorry, or a non-functional chimney or partly functional, because if it's not going to be functional, then it might as well take the opportunity to cap it in an appropriate way or reduce the number of flues coming out. So it was just some guidance to the owner or applicant.
Any other comments? Okay, so then we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Mac, seconded by Catherine. So you see the recommendation. I've already read it out. 18 Wellington Street. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Good luck. Now we're at 94 Bagot Street, the same heritage district. Some of us attended the site visit and are familiar with the issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this property is at 94 Bagot Street. It's the northwest side of the street near the intersection with West Street in the Sydenham ward. The subject property includes the southern unit of a 2.5-story semi-detached brick dwelling that was built circa 1859. The access to the property is via rear lane, which is known as Lily Lane in this area. This is the view of the property. Subject property is on the left side of your screen. The other's 96 Bagot on the right. So the property is designated as part of the Sydenham district only. The inventory notes it as a significant building to the district, specifically as it relates to its brick construction and its part in forming a wall row of brick dwellings along this part of Bagot Street. It was built for Patrick Hardy, who was a dry good merchant in 1859. The subject application before you today has to do with the replacing, number of things. So the replacing of the asphalt roof on the building with a new roof of a similar style roofing. The inclusion of 2 new skylights on the Baggage Street side and 1 skylight in the rear, as well as the removal and reconstruction of a 2-story rear addition, which you see on the screen. The current addition is in an advanced state of disrepair and has reportedly been without water and electricity for the past 3 years. The applicant has recently purchased a property and wishes to reconstruct the rear addition in the same location and at the same scale and dimensions as the existing structure in order to refurbish this building for 4 apartment units. No additional units are proposed. It's just same number. The reconstructed addition will be clad in horizontal shiplap type siding in a gray-brown tone. The applicant has indicated that the existing limestone foundation and the brick party wall on the south side will be retained and reused if possible. The proposed fenestration differs slightly from what's before you. The applicants have agreed to separate the windows into 2 vertical sliding sash windows on the second unit, or on the second floor, and then 1 on the main floor with the door with partial glazing. The roofing is to have a modest slope, and it'll be a standing seam metal roof. An overview of this application was provided by Mr. Jervin, and a engineering assessment letter was provided by David Oliver, a professional engineer, including photographs. There's also detailed plans in your agenda package. In terms of our review, the rear addition is not noted as an attribute in the district plan. It is not an individually designated building and is likely not original to this building. Staff recommend as a condition that a photographic inventory be completed of the interior and exterior of this structure prior to its removal. We also recommend that if the foundation, limestone foundation and party wall can be reused, that they should, or they shall. The proposed addition is clearly distinguishable from the brick heritage resource while complementing the heritage structure by its use of matching window trim and similar window configuration. The proposed addition being located at the rear of the property will be clearly secondary subordinate to the primary heritage building on this property and will have no impacts to the heritage district or Lily Lane in this area. This application was circulated to our agencies with no significant comments received. Building permits will be required and locates are also being required. This structure is the subject of a current work order by our property standards, which will be partially completed and closed with the removal and reconstruction of this addition. This application was circulated to the committee through our DASH program. The comments are summarized in the agenda. A couple of the members noted that they had concerns over the removal of and reconstruction of this rear addition and requested a heritage professional and a second engineer to determine the heritage value of this and structural stability of this addition. And as previously noted, the rear addition is not specifically noted. This isn't an individually designated building, and it's not noted in the inventory for the district. It's not highly visible from most of the public realms unless you're going down Lily Lane. According to the inventory, however, the property's contribution to the district is that brick facade along Baggett Street and its contribution to that row and that street pattern. This fenestration on the front as well. The removal of the rear addition, in our opinion, will have little impact to the heritage character of the district and Lily Lane, and therefore we have no objection to the application as before you. And our recommendation is on the screen with a number of conditions.
Okay, so there were a couple comments submitted in the preliminary round. Does anyone have any corrections to make to those? Oh, okay. Members of the public have a chance to address the committee, and that would be including the... Yeah, go ahead. Bottom left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank you for including recommendation 3, which has been missing from a number of these recommendations, and that is photographing the work that has been done. And it was noticeable, for instance, in the last application when you were dealing with a chimney, that it's very difficult later on to see just what was done and what is the state of those things. This committee always used to ask for any roof or chimney work to be photographed and the photographs to be filed with the planners. And I thank you for adding this one in this time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to address us? Okay. Agent for the application, go ahead.
Much. I think everything's pretty well been said. Just that very clearly, we really went into this project. The owner hadn't planned on tearing down the back part. That wasn't his preference, but it was such bad shape. And after having the engineer look at it, it really needs to come down. And I think that we've sort of bended and adjusted windows and so forth to match what some desires by the public and by the staff and so forth. So I hope you'll.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, members of the committee have a chance to submit oral comments to the file. Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have questions about the tearing down the back, partly because the letter was so short. It didn't really go into any detail, the engineer's letter. It's interesting now that Lily's Lane is part of the city's inventory of streets, it becomes that, is it public realm or not? Because we do make a big deal about whether the public can easily see something. So I did have my concerns and mentioned, maybe getting another opinion. I couldn't go to the site visit, but I understand it's much worse than the pictures, the photographs are, than the photographs appeared to show. So I can go along with this. Tearing it down, I really recommend trying hard to keep as much of the foundation as possible, because once it's new, it will be new, and it will be part of the public realm off Lily's Lane. So particularly the foundation, if that can be saved, would be good, because of this concern we have about tearing things down. If it's easy, heritage houses are not always easy. So I can go along with the recommendation because I've heard it is really quite dreadful there, but to do as much as possible to make it in keeping with the rest of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine?
A couple of questions. In the drawing on page 92 of the plans, it shows metal cladding on the back. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The plan does show that. We have discussed with the applicant, and they are happy to change that to a hardy board style shiplap siding as opposed to the steel, because we felt it was more appropriate given the character of that area.
Thank you. That's good to know. And it's not included actually in the recommendations, but when I look at the plans, it says, so we're talking about facing onto Bagot now, rebuild porch. And so just looking at the images, I mean, the porch and balconies that are there right now are totally out of keeping. So I'm wondering whether this actually is the rebuild of the porch and so on, because it looks from the images that it's going to be a more traditional porch and so on. If you could just clarify that.
Clarify that, Mr. Chair. The porch, I assume the member's talking about the front porch, which is not subject to this application today. That is something that the applicant will be coming back with, I understand, as it is pretty rough shape. But they are looking at refining those plans and looking at the age and character of that building, or that structure closely. So it is not part of today's application.
Yeah, so just for those following, so the in the inventory, the porch is mentioned, and it says in the letter from the agent that that was a surprise at the time, and so and that was not part of their plans to do anything with the porch, but it is protected in the plan, so any alterations to the porch would need a heritage permit, and it's not part of this permit, so that would be a separate heritage permit. Yes, Don?
I just want to echo Councillor Schell's remarks that it would be nice if the addition could be kept and repaired as far as possible, but we realize it's in poor condition and that may not be possible. My own view is that it should not be dismissed as a recent addition without any heritage value. It's quite an early addition, and I think the neighboring houses probably had their additions put on at the same time, and they sort of matched to some extent. And I believe it was on that addition is there on the 1905 fire insurance map. So it's been there a while. It is a period structure, and it would be a pity if it had to be taken down. That being said, you have to make hard decisions sometime, and I have some reservations about the engineer's letter because we've had experience before. You can get different opinions depending on who you ask, and if the rear stone foundation is resting on bedrock, as it probably is, I see no reason why it couldn't be repaired rather than taken down, new footings put in, and all that sort of thing. As far as the walls are concerned, the rear wall doesn't look so bad to me. The wall, which I guess is the south wall, butts against the neighboring one, so it probably is sound. The one opposite that is clearly in poor condition, but we don't know how poor. But anyway, in a sense, I'm satisfied with the recommendation because the recommendation says the applicant shall restore and incorporate all portions of the existing addition, both foundation and, well, it says southern party wall, into the reconstructed addition where possible. So, I think there's a message there that this committee and staff really want to retain the addition if it can be done. And so I think it should go forward with that understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. If you take the chair, I'll make my comments.
Yes, I recognize you.
Thank you. Site visit. To me, what really jumped out during the internal and external examination was the very poor condition of the southern, or the closest to Lily Lane. I guess that would be the western. I live right there. I should know which way is which, but anyway, yes, the way that faces the afternoon sun. So that is where the door was cut into the foundation to give basement access, and that part of the foundation is in really poor shape. Just to draw the committee's attention to I had it here, it was page 92, I think. Yeah. So in that short letter, and I agree more detail is always appreciated, but the short letter, it does say, and I quote, "The structure is in danger of collapse and repair is considered unsafe and impractical." It doesn't really go into any further detail, but that's in itself a worrisome statement. I would say from my own examination, that part of the foundation and the side that's not the party wall with the neighbor, because of the lack of heat and the moisture coming from unmaintained eaves troughs, that entire side wall, the stucco was coming off, and it looks a pretty sorry state too. And then the question becomes, what is the upside to restoring the assets as they stand and which aspects are beyond saving, and if you're going to save them, there has to be a reason for it. So there isn't a huge heritage asset upside to the addition as it stands today because of how badly deteriorated it is. However, I agree with Don and with Councillor Schell that whatever parts, especially of the foundation and of the party wall, can be retained. It would be not just a shame, but kind of silly to abandon those structural assets that are actually could easily be used in new construction. But the question is, how much of the foundation can actually be useful if you're removing part of the foundation? So that's a technical question I'm not sure we are able to answer here. But I agree with Don's last point about the fourth condition being key. About it does say as a condition that anything that can be used, it says incorporate all portions of the existing addition, and then it says example foundation or southern party wall, but it doesn't say exclusively those things. It just uses those as examples. So really it is all portions of the existing addition shall be restored and incorporated if possible. And that's a key condition. That's a condition on the permit. So staff will be monitoring that, and I'm sure the high quality of the agent's experience with heritage structures should come in handy, and I think it's the right recommendation, and I would feel comfortable recommending it to council. Thank you.
Returning the chair.
Any other comments? Okay. So it's the same wording as the previous files. The recommendation needs mover and seconder that Heritage Kingston supports council's approval of the following: that alterations 94 Bagot Street complete March 23rd. Said alterations to include the removal and reconstruction of a 2-story rear addition and to replace the existing asphalt roofing with like roofing, including new skylights. And there are 5 conditions, and we've already talked about condition number 4. So who would like to move this? Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Don. No discussion, right? Okay, we will vote on the recommendation. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Good luck with the work. The next item is an application for a heritage property tax refund, 269 to 271. Looks like Ryan will introduce this, and if you could just explain to the committee what you explained to me just before.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a little different application the committee doesn't see very often. We have 2 financial incentive programs in the city runs. The Heritage Property Grant Program, which is a granting of money following the completion of work for designated properties. And then this one, which is the Heritage Tax Refund Program, which is where we refund a portion of their taxes for work that they were completed in the previous tax year. So the application that's before you today is this property at 269, 271 Queen. It's at the corner of Queen and Barry. It's a 2-story mixed-use limestone building built in 1858-59, and it's designated under both Part 4 of the Heritage Act. It is also subject to a heritage easement agreement under Part 4 of the Act with the City of Kingston, which is a requirement in order to be eligible for a tax refund program. Is they are required to have an easement agreement on title, which includes basic property standards clauses for minimum maintenance and such. So it's a requirement of the Municipal Act, which governs these tax refund programs. So that's why it's a little different. And it's actually why we don't see so many of these, because under our register, we have 600, 800 designated properties, but only about 20 that have easements on them. So this gentleman at Queen Street, this is his 2nd or 3rd tax refund. He quite appreciates it, and it also reflects in the work on his building. So last year he received, actually 2 years ago, 2016, he received approval to do some alterations on this building under delegate authority. They were repairing doors, repairing porches, and repairing some shutters on the front of this building, which are prominent features from the public realm. The work wasn't completed until last year, which means he's eligible for the tax refund for this year. So the way the program works is the least of, so the work that he did, as you see in the agenda package, was estimated, or actually it cost just over $7,200. So the program is set up that the refund is either the total cost of the work, 40% of the taxes for municipal and school purposes, or $5,000, whichever is the least. So we send this information to our friends at the Financial Services Department, and they've come back to let us know that according to the formula, the 40% of their taxes is the least of that, which results to just over $4,100 in rebate. So that's what they're applying for. Under the grant program, or excuse me, under the tax refund program, we are required to run this information by you folks for confirmation that it's an eligible property, A, and B, that the work is eligible. And so our analysis, which is in your agenda package, the property meets the terms of the eligibility requirement, being a designated property and a property that's subject to the easement agreement. The work must be work that conserves and enhances the heritage character of the building. The work that was undertaken last year was to repair doors, shutters, and steps. The doors, actually, they are new doors. They weren't able to salvage the doors, but the glass that they put in them is actually the original glass. So they were able to put that back into it also, which is kind of exciting. So we are satisfied that the work that was undertaken meets the terms of the eligible work. And therefore, Mr. Chair, this is the recommendation that's before you for consideration, and we recommend approval.
Thank you. When you were talking about the original glass just then, it reminded me of my front window in the heritage building that I live in. I often find myself looking through that old glass because it distorts the picture. And it's sort of psychedelic, actually, to look at City Park through the old glass in my front window. So you really get a feeling for the passage of time when you see something like that so obvious. Anyway, thanks for explaining all that. I guess questions from members of the committee are now in order. Oh, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Just one quick question about slightly off topic, about the program. So there has to be a provincial easement on the property for this to be eligible for this tax break?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there has to be an easement on the property. So under the Heritage Act, you can have provincial easements under Part 2 of the Act, or municipal easements under Part 4 of the Act. Either qualifies or qualifies you as eligible for this program. Correct. Yeah, there are, as I said, there's about 20 properties in the city that have easement agreements on title. Yes.
My question would be, if you're eligible for a heritage tax refund like this one, can you also apply for a heritage grant? And would the new way that staff evaluates those, would the eligibility for an easement affect the grant application?
Mr. Chair, the way the grant program was amended, you can apply for either, but you can't have both. So, and the way that we've amended the way the council amended the grant program, they actually cap out at the same amount, both $5,000. So, I guess it depends on the alteration or what the applicant's desire is, but they can have either one.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. So we have a recommendation, need a mover and a seconder. Actually, no, members of the public can address the committee. Seeing none. Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Yep, Mac and Catherine. So the recommendation that it be recommended to council that the heritage property tax refund application for the designated property at 269-271 Queen Street be approved in the amount of $4,135.28 as the works undertaken and the property meet the eligibility requirements of bylaw number 2005-257. Any discussion? Don?
I don't have any problem supporting this, but have to comment that I am not entirely happy again with the procedures here. We're being asked to approve work that we don't really know what it involves. We don't know, the committee wasn't involved in the state of the previous windows and the design of the new windows, doors, I should say. So it's kind of not very relevant for the committee to give approval, but I'm certainly satisfied as far as I can tell. I guess the real issue is that the approval was carried out under delegated authority. And as I've commented in the past, I think quite often delegated authority is not being restricted to minor repairs, but is often used for rather extensive ones. And I think replacement of heritage doors is, in my opinion, not a minor alteration. I think the committee should have been involved.
Thank you. That's a valid point. Anyone else? Okay, we take the chair. I'd like to comment.
I recognize you.
Thank you. Since you brought it up, I think I would like staff to be aware of the concern just raised in the sense that if, when determining whether a file can be completed through delegated authority, if during that analysis staff can anticipate that there may be questions at another point in the process, such as this heritage tax refund application, and that we wouldn't have the supporting information or having dealt with the file because delegated authority prevents that. In other words, delegated authority is a good thing and we need it, and we need staff to be able to do work on our behalf and on council's behalf. But if it inadvertently prevents us from actually making a real decision when it comes to us in the case of this $4,000, then it's a bit of a problem because we're essentially being put on the spot for something that we weren't involved with. And that's an unintentional effect of the delegation bylaw. So I think that staff needs to use some discretion in cases where there may be, and I'm not saying this file particularly does include enough controversy for it to have a discussion in that committee, but the committee is where the members of the public get a chance to look at something. We, as members of the public sitting on the committee, get a chance to discuss it, and everybody's satisfied that the oversight was there. When it's done within City Hall by staff who are professionally trained, and they usually do everything by the book, what it doesn't have is that transparency. And with council's commitment to open government, it's something that I think staff should consider, that sometimes delegated authority, although the bylaw might allow it, might actually prevent that transparency from happening. Thank you.
I'm returning the chair.
Okay, we will, any other comments, discussion on the file? Then we'll call the vote on the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you. Yeah. So, this is exciting. We're already at working group reports, and it's, what times? The meeting's been less than an hour. This is a first, I think. An hour-long heritage meeting. Anyway, the working group report. So there is a cultural heritage working group briefing note, page 113. We have time to look at it, so we shouldn't rush through it. 113, 114, so this is a group with 10 or so members, and this would be our chance as members of the committee to ask questions about what's going on in the working group, because we oversee the working group. You'll see the notes there. I guess the first thing would be if there are any questions from members of the committee on what the Cultural Heritage Working Group is doing based on the report. Yes, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. It's about really the cultural heritage study. So that's Kingston Penn with ERA Architects. Could you fill that out a little bit? Because it looks like the city is going to hold public engagement sessions about this. So could we hear a little bit more, please?
Professor Campbell, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So this came out of the Cultural Heritage Working Group as well as the Properties Working Group and the Assets Working Group attending a visit to KP in the fall, and that was as part of a kind of a partnership, if you will, with planning and the Properties Working Group, who are working on the draft bylaw for the designation of the site if and when it were to transfer hands. Coming out of that, there was a decision that there was a component of the site that was cultural heritage that was difficult to capture into a designation bylaw. And so it was decided that we would pursue, ERA became the contract that was awarded, to basically do a study of the site and propose an interpretive strategy. And this is only a high-level planning document. This is not down to the detail of exactly what would perhaps happen. But we've asked ERA, we've engaged them to essentially study similar processes that have been engaged with other municipalities, including things like the Don Jail in the city of Toronto, the Distillery District, again in Toronto, that had these interpretive plans associated with them as part of their development and their transition as they were sold and then altered. So this is what we've asked ERA to provide, and what ERA has said, not without, we expected, they said we'd like to send some of our staff back to Kingston to meet with some of those who met the first time, talking specifically about the bylaw. So it's an opportunity for individuals in the community who might be conceived of as stakeholders who have specific stories or histories, relationships to that site. And ERA is going to come back and wants to host several meetings with interested community members who might have information to share that would help to inform that interpretive plan.
Thanks. Further, and this relates to Fort Henry, I think. If by chance St. Lawrence Parks Commission wound up as the owner of the prison or the bulk of the prison, then the federal designation would stay. Is that correct? That there wouldn't be a municipal designation?
That is certainly my understanding of the process. Unless there was a transfer into private ownership, it's only then that I understand the municipality would have the opportunity to apply a designation bylaw to the site. And this interpretive strategy or plan, if there was to be a federal transfer of land, we could certainly make that available to those, that internal transfer, but we would not, as I understand it, have kind of the legal position to apply it either through an easement or an accessory document to a designation.
Always the risk of public money, that the more we spend on this through city dollars, it may not actually have been necessary. And St. Lawrence Parks, if it happened, might say, thanks very much, but we've done our own. But it is good for us to have due diligence on something that may wind up in private hands.
And if I may, just on that note, it was certainly an in-house conversation as well about the sort of uncertainty of the future for that site. But we also think that it's an important process that we increasingly are going to confront, and that we need to understand what our options are. So one of the things that ERA has been asked to provide is that sort of environmental review of how municipalities have engaged with similar heritage conversations or questions, where designation bylaws, Part 4, Part 5, don't cover these sort of intangible attributes in the way that perhaps we might desire them to. So in this instance, we felt the risk was worth it because even if we were never able to apply this interpretation policy, we're hoping that we can really learn some important precedent-setting steps if we were ever to confront a similar situation with a property in the future.
Yeah, I have a question about this process, whether or not we can't predict the future, but I think I'm excited that we're looking at it from that perspective. I just want to ask a question. So, for example, and I know it doesn't go to, it's not going to result in something detailed, but could we imagine something similar to, say, the Haunted Walk or some kind of interpretive thing like they have at some Parks Canada on the Rideau Canal where people in period costume? Would one of the things that might come out of this could it be some kind of interpretation of the stories with or without costumes, with or without actors, or professional tour guides that have interpretive experience, that kind of thing? Is that something that could come out of this?
A world is your oyster in what could come out of this. What we expect to get back is, trying to describe it best, would be more a series of themes and histories and periods of development of the site, perhaps groups that would be referenced. And it might present some options for mechanisms of interpretation, but it would not prescribe them. And this is where it would become a more nuanced conversation with a property developer about what exactly they're going to do to satisfy the conditions as outlined in that interpretive plan. But they may very well come back and say, understanding this portion, this thematic part of the site's history, the developer could say, we're going to propose, a costumed-led guided tour focusing on these elements. And then, as I understand it, that would be associated perhaps to a development process or application, permitting, et cetera. A whole host of things might come in there. And if council had the authority then, if it became a municipal kind of governance piece, then council would have an opportunity to agree to whether or not that satisfied the interpretive criteria that were assigned to the site.
Thank you. Rich in that kind of aspect that has nothing to do with the Heritage Act, basically, but it is something that Cultural Heritage Group can look at, and I'm happy that they are doing so. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we need to receive the briefing notes. Need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Patricia. There's just the one, eh? This is the only one. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Great. Now we are at Business F, update regarding emergency approvals. There's an item there. Does staff need to address us on that? No. So that's in the package. If you like to look at it, there it is. And the next thing would be new motions, and there aren't any notices of motion. Other business. Any other business? Yes, Mac.
This is good. Now that we have the District 5, the Heritage, Part 5 of the Heritage Act. So in a Part 5 district, are you guys still trying to designate places, special houses as Part 4? Or do you just, now that it's all Part 5, it's all designated and you don't do anything about it anymore? That's just the question.
Thank you, Mr. A Part 5 gives us a certain amount of control over managing development in the future in those areas. It has guidelines that come along with it in the form of the district plans. So those properties, in a manner of speaking, are protected. Coupled with that, the fact that we have a list of about 500 listed properties that could potentially be Part 4s that are not in those districts, and a master list that's probably in the 800 property range that has no protection on it. So, and then there's the designated in Part 4 properties that were done in the 1970s and 80s that are really difficult to administer. So perhaps once we get through reviewing all of those, at some point we'll go back and look at Part 4s on Part 5 districts, but it's really not a top priority in our near future as I see it.
Also, I think, as I understand it, if there is legislation from both, like in the cases of formerly designated Part 4 properties that are now part of heritage districts, they've been described in the heritage district inventories, so that information is retained, but the Part 4 designation itself is kind of, it's subservient to the Part 5, like the Part 5 legislation takes precedence over the Part 4 if both apply, right? The Part 4 is kind of grandfathered in, but it's not, it doesn't trump the Part 5, is that correct?
The process under the Heritage Act currently for Part 5 properties, for districts that have a Part 4, a property has a Part 4 on it, the Part 5 process does trump it for external changes. The difference with the Part 4 designation is that we could include interior attributes, which are not covered under the Part 5 protocol. And it also gives a little more weight to certain attributes of those properties. If the property warrants consideration of certain attributes that perhaps are unique or whatever, the Part 5 does give a little more weight to that. The Part 4, I mean, excuse me, gives a little more weight to that. So there are some benefits to having a Part 4 and a Part 5. But for the most day-to-day operations and such, the considerations that we give to a Part 5 are very similar to those that we give to a Part 4. It's just the process for alterations are a little different.
Just sort of, that's the reason why I asked. It seems that if we have a Part 4 building and a Part 5, then we do pay a little more attention to it. And so now if all the really nice buildings in a Part 5 district, that might be a nicer building than something you're doing in another district doesn't have that designation, you know, I can see where your priorities are, but at the same time, you know, Part 4 does make us look a bit at the really nice buildings. It'll look closer than even those in a Part 5. So I know it's a difficult balance and you've got lots of work to do, but I'm just curious where that was falling in the tracks.
Yeah, and just keep in mind that the Ontario legislation, the Part 5 edition was an evolution of the thinking on heritage. So there may be further evolution too coming from the province where the Part 5 would be, you know, just one of the pieces. So I don't know. I think to be current, we have to start from the perspective of Part 5, and then if there's historically Part 4 as well, like you said, we pay closer attention. Councillor Schell?
Subject, there was recently a public meeting about the Berryfield retirement residence application, and part of the application that came to council included that Heritage Committee would be consulted now that it's a formal application. Any idea when it would be coming to Heritage for discussion?
I'm looking over at Marnie. I don't, Mr. Chair, certainly when the developer comes to actually put buildings on that property in Berryfield, there's certainly going to be a heritage permit process involved, a rather extensive and detailed one. Unless I'm wrong, I don't believe the planning application will necessarily be coming to this group for consultation. But certainly when we look at the buildings themselves and when they get to the detailed stage of what the look and the massing of the buildings are going to be, certainly there'll be a Heritage Act process.
Just to be clear, then it come back to the committee for that process, or?
The Part 5 process for erecting new buildings in a district, similar to what we did across the street on Wellington Street, where they erected a new house. So there will be that process. There will be a Part 5 erection process for under the Heritage Act. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don, I believe you had some other business?
Yeah, I'll just move to the committee's attention that little addendum that I sent around because I think it has some interesting comments in it. This committee so often sees applications for replacing old windows with modern metal-clad insulated windows. We have a report relating to the Pittsburgh County Library, or Kingston East Library, which includes an old heritage house, Hawthorne Cottage, and there the comments in the report from the assessor is that the original historic windows are in place, in good condition, need minor repairs. Limestone is in good condition. And then there's some comments on the addition to that site dating back to 2000, and it says that all of the aluminum-clad wood windows that were installed in 2000 are to be replaced. 18 years. It also makes some comments about some of the acrylic stucco wall finish that has to be replaced as well. So we shouldn't, as a committee, we shouldn't lose sight, we shouldn't allow ourselves to be persuaded that because something is old, it needs to be replaced. In fact, I think a good rule of thumb is that if a window has survived 120 years, it'll survive forever if it's given any kind of maintenance at all.
We're actually now on item 12, correspondence, because that's what Don was talking about, which is fine. Unless it was any other business, we can go back. Thank you for writing that. Thank you for including it. We did have a discussion last night, and council, I'm happy to say, did support unanimously the restoration of the site and keeping the library there. That was passed last night. I actually made a similar comment at council about just because sometimes older buildings actually are cheaper to maintain than newer buildings, and this is a perfect example of that. But it's not necessarily the case. I mean, some older buildings also require a lot of work and a lot of expense. It depends on the point of time that you're intervening, right? Yeah. Mac, did you have something to say about correspondence?
Yes, I'm just curious what windows they were replaced in the year 2000? What make they were? The aluminum clad?
I'll allow it here, but we're not going to spend too much more time on it. Yeah.
Would you mind letting me know? Drop me an email? Thank you.
Yeah, there's something to be learned from that, from the decisions already been made, but it does affect what we do here and the decisions that we make when it's restoration versus demolition, especially. So thanks for bringing that to attention. Okay, we're finding things to. Yes, is this correspondence?
It's just a follow-up from Mac's point.
On the correspondence?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about the letter of correspondence about the library site. Go ahead.
Mac had asked for him to be, I'm so sorry. Mac had asked for him to be notified, if we could all be notified about what those windows were. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next meeting is May 16th. It will be spring by then, I guarantee it. Thank you. We need an adjournment. Who would like to move? Councillor Schell. All those in favor? This meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.